This week in Pure Reinvention.
I really can't express the excitement of it. You know, we were riding up, we were by ourselves, and it was starting to get dark. And we were saying, this is really crazy. We've never done this before.
Episode 146, Steve Whitter, Quantum Growth Extraordinaire.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Aaron, for episode 146, we had my friend Steve Whitter, who had a fabulous story to tell.
Well, Steve definitely was a great listen. I think one of the great things that he mentioned was sort of the inclusivity of his execution and planning and organizing of his staff, his volunteers. It truly was a village that pulled off the race. Also, I think that having him be the great athlete that he is something that, you know, is not as clear through his message, but certainly something to recognize in his ability to inspire others, even down to the last person walking across the finish.
Isn't that amazing? Whether you were the first one or whether you were the last one, you were as important a participant in the endeavor.
Exactly.
And how many times do we see that?
Not often. I think it is a culture today of good job, everyone's a winner, but in reality, you don't see that.
We don't really behave that.
Not at all.
Steve is an amazing individual and very inspiring. Aaron, I know that, like you said, he was a great listen. He's even more inspiring as an individual, and I think the takeaways are just immeasurable. So let's listen.
This week's episode is sponsored by HRM Services, providing solutions that work. HRMS provides customized human resource consulting services to fit the unique needs of their clients. Every client has a story, and they make it their business to learn yours. Contact HRM Services today at 517-974-8033 or visit their website at hrmservices.biz.
Very special treat today. We're here with my friend Steve Whitter. It's been really phenomenal as the host of the Pure Reinvention podcast to think of unique guests that we can bring that have, I guess, unique stories. But as I got to thinking about the lessons that leaders can take away from a couple of the examples that Steve is involved with, I really became intrigued. And I'm really looking forward, Steve, to this conversation. So thank you very much for agreeing to be here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Steve, let's first talk about your tenure as the race director, Race for the Cure. You were the race director for 10 years?
Yes, at least.
Help me understand how many participants were involved with that race when you first got started as race director.
When we first started and I offered my capabilities and volunteered, I think the first year we had probably under 1,000, around 700.
And you were an avid runner.
Yes, I have.
Very fit athlete. And so you were the race director involved with something that you knew a tremendous amount about.
Yeah, I had been a race director for the City of Lansing Parks and Recreation Department in a number of capacities. I had organized running races in the past. I've done some mountain bike races, and I've helped out in organizing cycling races.
Now, I've known enough about you, Steve, to know that if you're going to get invested in something, you're going to invest in something where you can make a difference.
Yeah, very true. It's all in.
It's with you, it's all in. And you want to really have a chance to take that thing to the next level, whatever your all in is.
Yeah, I think so. You want it to have people make a difference in their life, and the Komen race allowed us to broaden that a little bit and help other people as well.
So as the race director over a 10-year period of time, starting with, you said 600 participants, 10 years later, how many participants were involved in that race?
I think in our best year, we were over 6,000.
So somebody doing the math on that, and especially if you're a leader involved in events, having that kind of tremendous growth is exactly what every event director for any kind of event wants to see take place. And is a testament, Steve, to the kind of leadership you brought to the event. So here's the question I have. How in the world did you do that? And I know that's really broad, And yet you're smiling because you have an answer. And I'm very curious to know how you were able to create such a community, not just around the event, which was a 5K, right?
Yes.
But it was really it was bigger than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And you had to first kind of understand runners, number one, and the thing that they're looking for and what their interests were. So you have to understand your audience then.
Okay. And what were runners really, in your mind, were they wanting to participate in?
Well, I think first off is safety. You have to consider the safety of all the participants and take in all that you can do to make it a safe course. You'd like to make it interesting. You don't always have that capacity to do that based upon where you want to start or where you have to finish or what guidelines the city presents to you. But we had an opportunity to utilize the state capitol grounds, which was in itself something very unique.
Right.
So uniqueness is also an element that you want to add.
So that's a big attraction.
Very big. And then we wanted to use it to our best capacity. And we wanted to focus on breast cancer survivors. And so we created a stroll, just a very casual walk for the breast cancer survivors to introduce them. And State Capitol offered us that backdrop for that. And it made them a big focus.
So this was not just for the competitive runners who were looking for a PR. You actually created a whole series of experience before the race even started.
Yeah, very much so.
And it was a showcase. Is a celebration the right word?
Very much so. A survivorship.
A celebration of the survivorship for these individuals.
Right.
And that became the central theme.
That became the most important theme.
And so how did you build community and robustness around that central theme when everybody had their running shoes on?
Well, you introduce them. You give out some of their stories. You give them an opportunity to express how important it is to donate and contribute so that survivorship can occur for almost everybody who takes over breast cancer.
Right. It sounds as though what you were creating was an emotional connection. So these people were there because the audience became anyone that was connected to someone they knew who might have experienced this.
Very much so. You're inviting families to come together and bond together for a big cause.
Right. And so their involvement is not because they want to start at the first two rows of the race. No. It's because they want to be a part of something bigger than them.
Very true. Very true. And therefore, you also put an importance not just on the first person or winning awards or something, but it's the last person who gets to the finish line successfully.
See, that's what's interesting is you created an event that completely emotionally connected and embraced everyone.
Yeah.
And so they weren't just there.
Right.
They were there.
Yep. You highlight them as much as you can, and you express the celebration for them and with them of their survivorship. And you try to do that in as many ways possible. Now certainly giving them shirts, T-shirts, which all runners love to get, and make them feel very special about it.
But and everybody, of course, was wearing them.
Right.
So that bonded them all together, which is the symbolism, right? So, and then this was the next question I was going to ask you because you had brought this up, was the importance of infrastructure. So all of a sudden I'm learning, because I was thinking infrastructure was roads and organization. Right. And all of a sudden you just introduced to me the fact that by wearing T-shirts and everybody being connected together by the T-shirts they were wearing, that's infrastructure.
Very true. We wanted to make a grand spectacle at the beginning, not only in the size of the crowd, but in any other capacity we had. So banners, our sound system. We created special survivor banners that we had along the course. Every running event has mile markers, but we created additional messages along the route to inspire people as they started and to get them to the finish line.
So you made this an experience so aggressive that there was a loss if you didn't participate. I mean, you felt a loss because this was a very special event you created.
We tried to make it exciting and interesting out on the course. So we had a lot of musical entertainment on there because certainly a running event is a physical fitness event, but we also wanted it to be fun.
Well, I can think of almost everyone, Steve, that I come in contact with on a daily basis that talks about their revenue declining, their participation declining. Everybody's busy. Nobody has time to do these things that you're talking about. And yet, when I listen to you talk, I realize that the real key is you have to make it engaging, participatory. They have to feel included. You have to build their own community. So this wasn't a community for you as the race director. This was a community where you had to understand who was coming and why and build their community.
That's true. And it takes a lot of volunteers to do that. And you have to spend a lot of time in instruction and training on your volunteers, from course marshals to people who are preparing food to people who are out at the aid stations and so forth. And you want to involve them. So we set up special training programs, and we'd invite survivors to come and talk to the volunteers to make them aware that, boy, we can't hold this event, raise the money that we need without a good camaraderie of volunteers.
Now, every event has a good leader. So in this particular case, we're talking about you.
Well, I had a lot of help.
But you also, if I remember watching you on those days, you also were front line. You were not in an ivory tower somewhere directing. You were front line, on the streets, very active, participating.
Yeah, I have a philosophy as a race director on the day of. I really don't have any duties or responsibilities. I want to oversee, which goes back to the training programs that we did months before, because it took over 200 people to put on a small event, small being a 5K event. A lot of people, but a small area. And we had to very well define for all of our volunteers exactly what they were going to do and how they interconnected with other people. And my job on the day of was to deal with problems.
So this behavior, this leadership behavior that you're talking about, of being all in, is something that you live by.
Yeah, I think so.
And most recently, after just coming back from a trip to France,
yes,
you have had one of your most phenomenal experiences as a very dedicated cyclist.
Yes. There are really two great big one-day rides over in Europe that are very well known. Etape is one ride that is a one-day event that follows the exact route that Tour de France riders do in one day. There's another annual event called Llama Molt, and basically it's a marmot which lives on Alpe d'Huez, one of the famous mountains. And that is a one-day ride of 109 miles over 4 major mountains of the Tour de France, and it has about 15,000 feet of climbing in it. So it's a long day of riding.
Yeah, that's a lot of climb.
That's a lot of climb.
So tell us about that day.
Well, I have done that event 3 times before, and I should correct myself. I have participated in that event 3 previous times and was unable to finish it. So I tried a 4th time, and we had pretty good weather. I've been going back.
And the reason, let's just make this clear, the reason that you were not able to complete the previous 3 were...
I had 1 year on the 3rd mountain climb, I had some cramps, muscle cramps in my leg.
Yeah.
And that prohibited me from continuing on because the company I was with, their SAG vehicle could not get to me if I started up the last mountain.
Sure.
Then 2 years ago, the heat was overwhelming.
Yeah.
They changed the route. Instead of 4 climbs, they added another one. So we had 5 climbs to go. But the heat in the valley and throughout the day was over 100 degrees. And so
these are all situations.
It was difficult for us to complete the event. And you have to get to the base of the fourth climb in 10 hours.
Oh,
and
sure.
then they shut it down.
Sure.
But over half of the field that year didn't get to go up. So I entered again, and heaven knows sometimes I question that sanity of doing that.
But this is the disciplined leader, right?
This was important.
I'm not going to let this one go. I'm going to make it happen.
And I set out a training program for myself.
Okay, now let's make sure we hear the parallel here. Attention to detail for the Komen race, months and months and months and months in advance, so that by race day we're prepared.
Yeah. Crucial.
Individually for yourself, months and months and months of preparation for you to be able to handle what you're about to ask your body to do on this day. Okay.
Well over 7 months of preparation. Certainly during the winter, there was a lot of time in the gym, a lot of weights, some spinning classes and so forth. Yes. And then once the weather would break decently in February, then the schedule to try to build mileage. And you can't just jump into 100 miles and go.
I think people just think about that day, and they don't really think about the 7 months of training or the amount of volunteer training you did to make the Komen race so successful.
Yeah, it did take you have to sit down and actually write it out, just like you would write out the objectives and different duties and responsibilities of volunteers for a race. Have to write out all the elements that this event was going to incorporate.
So tell us about your day on the tour.
Well, the day started at 7:30. We come down our mountain in the base and line up with 7,000 other riders, and they started in different heats.
That big.
No, it was huge. And we started in the third wave, so we were about 7:30. And then pretty much after a nice flat area, we had our first climb, warm-up climb. And the first climb took me 3 hours. And then big, long descent, which was pretty sketchy at the top.
That's actually kind of scary.
Yeah, it is.
What you were saying.
Yeah. There are no guardrails up at the top and the turns and so forth. A long descent, and then about 30 miles through the valley to the second climb, and made that and knew that this was going to be a long day and started to question my sanity in signing up.
Which every leader does, I'm sure, when they're in the middle of a project.
Yeah. And by that time, I was closing in on our second aid station that our tour group had set up. And I knew the mountain, the third one that was coming up, and that was the big one at over 9,000 feet. And I had serious doubts about it. And I stopped at our SAG vehicle and started to eat, because that's the other part that you have to prepare a long time.
So fuel.
Just understand what your body likes, what it needs, and fuel up constantly. The training part previously in the summers, sometimes that's the easiest part. The hardest part is to understand how much recovery you need after training. And so like in preparation for this, I got maybe 2 days of riding at altitude there. And then
Which is not a lot.
Not a lot. Not a lot to have any capability in red blood vessel development and so forth that you need to ride at altitude. But I also knew that I needed some recovery days ahead. So I rested for 2.5 days prior to the event. So I get to the base of the third climb, and that was the giant. That was the biggest one at over 9,000 feet. And one of our staff rode along with me, and he was pretty smart. He didn't ride alongside and just chat with me. He kind of was 30, 40 yards ahead of me all the time, kind of luring me on, And we took a few breaks going up, and you have serious doubts, and you start to look up, and you see that there are 3, 4, 5 switchbacks, and you can see some vehicles or other riders going up, and you say, I got to still go up there. And then once we get to the top, then I knew we had a long downhill. But also in the back of my mind was the leader of our tour company. I knew he was waiting for me, and he was at the base of Alpe d'Huez, which is the last climb. And I knew that climb, at best, I could do it in maybe 90 minutes.
At best.
At best. And now I've already put in close to 100 miles already. And I knew that that was going to be well over 2 to 3 hours of just going up there. And I knew he was waiting on me. And I go, oh, I really don't want to do this. And I had to really talk to myself a lot. And he was there, and we rode up together.
And so even though in your mind the easy way would have been to stop,
yeah,
you found a way to keep going.
Yeah. Once I made the last long descent and had to come back to the valley, and then that was about 5 miles of flats prior to, I really had to talk to myself and say, you know, I've been wanting to do this. This is my best chance. I've never gotten this far before, and I've got to go.
And I've got somebody that's going to go with me.
And I have a partner who will ride along with me. And I said, yeah, 3 times I didn't make it. The 4th one, I'm going to do it. And so we did. And it was 14 hours of riding. So it was an awfully long day, but a great feeling.
Tell me the feeling that an individual gets when they accomplish something that has such a degree of physical investment, but more importantly than that, at the end, you had to really overcome your mind telling you couldn't do it. That was actually bigger than the physical side.
That was the bigger part.
How does a leader get through that self-doubt?
You go back to your training program and you said, I've put in all of this time, all of this dedication, all of this effort to understand the challenge and say, this is my best opportunity. I've got to go all in, give it everything I got. Last time I may be slower. I may have to get off the bike and stop and rest, but the mountaintop is still there. I really can't express the excitement of it. You know, we were riding up, we were by ourselves, and it was starting to get dark. And we were saying, this is really crazy. We've never done this before. But because I've gone up that mountain many, many times over 12 years. But this was the happiest I ever was.
I guess I'm the one who did, given the title of Quantum Growth Extraordinaire. I want to, Aaron, spend a few minutes and hear your takeaways about the race and how Steve was able to grow that from such a small number to such a large number during his tenure. How did he do that?
Fundamentally through empowerment. I believe that the people that participate in the races, I think you even talked about it, that there's so many races that the interest is dwindling. People are busy. They have other things to do. But with this race, you find it growing. But he is using the race to inspire, to empower. I've done races before too, and I know how important it is to have people on the sideline cheering me on, but I had never heard of having signage with the mile markers that send inspiring messages as I'm running. Like, I could only imagine that can be super motivating. I think that he's using the race as a clear opportunity to connect in a deeper way beyond the physical and more with the spiritual.
I think you've said something really phenomenal, and that's using the connect word. Is it became more than a race. It became a whole experience, right? The event, which was about breast cancer, was a celebration of survivors. And the highlight of that group of individuals and the celebration of all of those stories and all of the energy that goes into that particular diagnosis. But instead of feeling sad, right, we put energy towards the celebration of those who survived, those who are struggling or were touched by it. And, oh, by the way, we just also happen to have a race. Mm-hmm. But the race really wasn't the core part, was it?
No.
It was the experience. It was why we are coming together. What was bringing these people together wasn't the race. It was a chance to celebrate the event. And when people look back on what they did, what they said was, we were a part of this wonderful experience. The fact that they were first or last in the race, only that part of the experience included a 5K, walk, jog, run, race, whatever. And how many times do we as leaders, Aaron, need to learn how to connect all of those things together like that?
All the time. A leader's job fundamentally is inspire and to motivate people and to bring them together. That's as I mentioned before, the only way we can progress. You think about the all, think about the collective. And I'm just so grateful that he had this vision for what the event could be, because, not only is it a celebration of triumph and resilience, but it's a celebration of life. Not too often do we, take the time to celebrate the present and the gift that we have in the now. We're always planning for the future, planning for this and thinking about what's next, when we are just talked about what's next is not promised. So we have to celebrate now.
The other thing that people need to know about Mr. Widder is he is an avid cyclist. He is at the level where every year he goes to France and he duplicates one of the legs on the tour. And I believe in the past years, he has actually ridden some of the most difficult legs on the Tour de France himself. Now, he's not as young as he once was, but he is able to commit to doing the best that he can today, knowing today it doesn't get any better, right? And you have to do your best work today. And whether it takes you 4 hours or 14 hours is not as important. You have to get into the event. In his particular case, you have to get on the bike. But for other people, it could be something different. And you have to get going. Mm-hmm. And he is a wonderful example of it doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your fitness level. You just need to be committed and keeping it real.
Just do it.
If you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.